You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
So we're speaking with Alise Versella. This is Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast. And Alise, as you might have seen, there's some poetry episodes. I personally adore poetry, and this is Poetry Friendly Zone, and I love great poets. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It makes me so happy that you're a fan of poetry.
Yeah. I geeky enough to have studied both Old English and Middle English poetry as an undergraduate in studies, so which takes a particular mindset. But
what were some of your favorites?
Well, I got to tell you something strange about this. Let's just talk poetry. I had this professor. I was at the University of Rhode Island, and his approach was really different, right? So we're reading Old and Middle English poetry, kind of like of the epic sort, and fragments and all this. And he was so deep on the intonation and the power of the cadence and of the sounds that we almost studied it from a way of which my mind wouldn't necessarily want to think about it, because I'd be like, what are the concepts behind it? Like, what is historical event is this referring to? But we got pulled back all the time to how it sounded, and he would recite it, and it was such a different way of looking at it. So I became versed in a very different way early on in studying poetry. And of course I had studied a lot of some of my favorite poets being Robert Frost. The contemporary poet I adore, and I hope is on the show sometime, Morgan Parker.
Okay.
There are more beautiful things than Beyonce is one collection she had done. But
I love that title.
yeah, and she has another title which is provocative. Others people comfort keeps me up at night.
Ooh. Damn.
Yeah. Check out Morgan Parker. But we're talking about you, Alise Versella. And I was going into this episode and my mind shifts a little bit, thinking more about poetry. I'm actually picky about poetry. I adore really moving poetry, and it's like jazz for me. Like, I'm picky about jazz, but when I hear jazz that I love, I feel the music more than other types, but only with particular things. So
Absolutely.
I really enjoy your poetry and its power. And I've read When Wolves Become Birds.
My
And
baby.
yeah, I wanted you to talk about your poetry and talk about this book and transformation.
Yes. Oh man. So this book was written over the course of like a good 6 years. I was leaving a job, I was leaving a boyfriend, my grandfather had died. So there was a lot of, I think I was about 25. So I was like at this very strange cusp of like, we're no longer like a teenager anymore. We're not like early 20s. I'm trying to like move forward in a career and, just becoming my own person, and having lost that in the relationship that I was in. And so a lot of this book became a sense of grieving, not just like you would a death, but like an emotional death. And so grieving parts of myself as I'm growing up and maturing, and figuring out what I really wanted from life. And it felt like at that moment in my life, I was very stuck. So once the poem started kind of taking shape, I found it to be like the myth of the werewolf. I kind of felt like I am trapped in this monstrous body, and how do I shed that skin and remind myself that, I have so much opportunity if I just had the courage to take it. So then the book kind of became this whole, we're going from the wolf to a bird, and reminding yourself that, if you just unfurled your wings and like took off, you can have like whatever you're reaching for. So
I think,
a lot of
yeah,
this book helped me get over a lot of stuff.
yeah, and I'm sorry to to jump in right there, but
Oh no.
one of the pieces I really pick up on is like change and transformation, and I can personally relate to it in the way of, as I identified as an artist and creator, my entire life has been transformed. And the process of becoming or trying to understand can be such an active process for anybody, right?
Right.
And loss, right? And within that
Absolutely.
process.
Yeah, and I feel like it's never really over. I kind of feel like you're always losing I don't want it to sound like it's a terrible thing to lose. I think you're losing layers of yourself, and maybe the things that society puts on you, or growing up, things that your parents might put on you. So I think when we go through life, the transformation is always happening, and just trying to become the best version of yourself.
I've been I had listened to a book recently. It's called Heartbreak by Florence Williams, and she's a writer I've been interested in. She's done books on the transformations that happen if you go into the woods, what happens
Mm,
physiologically, psychologically. So some kind of deep experiences. And what she studied was the study of heartbreak and the reality of that loss, and how coming to terms with the importance, enormity, and seriousness of the traumatic event is really important. And to talk about it in scientific terms, just to
yeah.
realize what is happening, and why that it doesn't feel like it goes away, or why is it 3 years later and I'm still having this thought that feels pretty now, right? Stuff like
Right.
that.
And
Yeah.
I think maybe like young teenage girls are always, people mock them in a sense, because it's like, it's just a boy, just get over it. And it is a very traumatic thing, especially like your first heartbreak, or even as you get older and like you experience different kinds of heartbreak. Different relationships end sometimes more traumatically than others. And that is a thing we all need space to heal. Like, we have to allow people to go through that and not mock them for their grieving of it.
Well, yeah, I completely agree. And well, even obviously I agree there, but even on just learning through that book, Heartbreak, is that when you talk about the science and you talk about medical facts, the number one health risk for women of a certain age, maybe I don't want to quote anything not specific, but from like 30 to 60, is a divorce or a loss of a partner. The other indication, the other health risks pale in comparison to the loss. So even just looking as a crass scientific medical
Yeah,
matter, and not poetically, which of course is important, like we have to come to terms with, when we've lost, it isn't just some shit that just happens to everybody. Yeah, it does, but it's significant when it happens. So
absolutely. I mean, I used to work on a senior assisted living when I was a teenager, and people would talk about, you know, people dying of broken hearts. Like, if you've now reached this age and your life partner passes, yeah, shortly after, usually you would see that shortly after, the other half of that partnership passes away pretty quickly as well.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for When Wolves Become Birds, because the what's in there, I think, can be really helpful. And again, pausing and acknowledging on things that aren't flippant. They're the opposite of.
Yeah.
They're the opposite of that. So I really enjoy talking about poetry, and one of the things I wanted to ask you, which is one of the bigger conceptual questions, as a creator, as a writer, a poet, when did you see yourself as an artist, like as part of your identity? Is that a moment or a development? Oh, or have you always been? What's your relationship with being an artist?
So I feel like I've always, in some form, been artistic. And I do remember being very small, watching Bob Ross and telling my grandparents, I'm going to be a painter one day. And like
Yeah.
you play the game of life, and it was like, I'm going to be the artist. So I felt like I thought I was going to be a painter. I still do paint when I'm not writing, but I think the first time I considered poetry, when I was in the 6th grade. So I was like 12 and like very angsty, and I couldn't really formulate how I felt verbally. So I would start writing it out. And I really owe the whole poetry thing to my sophomore year creative writing teacher, Mrs. Jessup. She was the first one to be like, I think you have some talent here. You should pursue this further. And so I had a lot of really great English teachers, and Mrs. Jessup really kind of light that fire for me to consider it as something I could pursue.
Yeah, let's take a moment. Thank you, Mrs. Jessup. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Right?
I saw her recently too. I did a book signing at Thunder Road Books in Spring Lake, New Jersey, if anyone's looking to shop at their
Yeah,
local
Jersey.
bookstore.
Get your Jersey rep. Yep.
Yes. I saw Mrs. Jessup there, and I hadn't seen her since probably graduation, and it was just so good to like actually thank her in person and to be like look at what you've helped me create, essentially.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think there can be a more important statement. I've represented those in education for almost a quarter century. So those that look at you and help you see who you are in that
Yeah,
way, that's
absolutely.
that's
Before
that's
you
why.
even know
Yeah,
yourself.
you're right. That's why you break one direction or the other. And for better or for worse, I mean, I think each narrative is different, but celebrating when somebody's like, "Hey, this is what I see. This is what I see in you." And when you're younger, being like, "Well, I guess that's what I see in myself. They see it in me too. So let's
It
go."
is nice to
Right?
have someone point out something that they see in you like that, whatever it is. If someone, because you just want to be seen when you're that age.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you something, Elise, because I went back and I was trying to figure out, because I'm out in the woods of Oregon and I love coming in contact with arts everywhere. And I was like, how did I find Elise? And I figured it out.
Oh, thank God, this has been like
Yeah.
nagging at me.
Well, it's good I brought it up, because I made a note in my art podcast journal, and the illustrator Andrea, and I don't know how to pronounce her last name, Hrnjak.
Yes.
Now, I had seen Andrea's illustrations for quite some time, and I believe they're just gorgeous and delicate, uh, and it was right around that time, probably maybe when you announced your book or some of the lead up artwork or
Oh my
something, and that caught my
gosh.
eye, and then I
Ah,
started to connect with your poetry. Yeah.
listen, I love that so much because I kind of believe that the universe transpires for us a lot of the time. And when I was trying to find a cover image for this book, I had a very specific idea in my mind, and I was just trying and hoping and praying that I could find something that would, you know, be what I saw in my head. And I found the image for the book. I found it on Pinterest, And I was like, who's the artist? And I found her, and I remember emailing her, and she said, how did you even find that? That is such an old photo, like an old piece of art. She's like, let me at least
I'm
rework
I'm
the
like that.
colors for you.
Yeah, I'm like that too. It
But it
doesn't
was
matter
so
where it was.
perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah. It was
yeah.
just so perfect. Like the image for the cover was exactly what I saw in my head, like the transformation of a wolf and this woman and the owl, because I'm super obsessed with like birds of prey. Um, but yeah, Andrea did the best job. I love her art
Well,
so much.
it's an odd combination. It's my experience of how this comes together in my head is going to be unique. But for me, it was very interesting to see the combination of like to come in contact with the writing within, but also that on the outside. And I think it's a unique experience to see what is reflected visually, when somebody else does it somehow. And that's why you ask her for the image. It's like it doesn't matter whether it's your notebook or whatever. It's the image that like is the
Yeah,
book. So like, can I
absolutely.
have or buy or something, please?
Yes. It was
That's great.
wonderful.
Yeah. So that's how I ran into your stuff. So very
Huge
cool.
shout
I like
out
that.
to Andrea, bringing people together.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's what it is. I'm telling you, it's arts organizing. I think that's what the whole
Yes.
project is, getting
Oh, I
people
love
together
that.
to celebrate the arts. So, and then after my contact with your poetry, then you have a fan going forward, and so it's a good connection. Gonna jump to a big question. You dedicate a lot of time and attention and creativity towards what you do. The big question is, what is art? What is art?
Oof. What is art? God, it's the thing that keeps us alive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Keeps it literally is. I mean, point blank, that's what it is. What would humanity be without art? I mean, if you look at society now, it's like we need a lot more art, I think. I think people need art for connection, because look at what it's done for us right now. Like 3 people have been connected by art
Sure.
and
Sure. Yeah.
poetry. Um, you find people, like-minded people that you would not have otherwise come across. It makes you feel less lonely as a person, um, because a lot of the times, life can be lonely, even if you are like surrounded by people. If they don't really understand what's in your heart and soul, and you wouldn't know that about someone without art. The kind of movies that they watch, the kind of literature that they read, or the music that they listen to, what paintings speak to them, what kind of theater they like to attend. That's all how you get to know a person on a very deep level. So art is like empathy as well. It's how you put yourself in someone else's shoes. There are people across so many different borders. You would never know what their life is like, and how could you unless they're giving you a piece of their art. That's how you learn about people and cultures.
I love asking a poet, what is art?
It's so lofty, but it really is just like
No, it's
the
it's
tether
the
that
it's
keeps us
feeling.
here.
Yeah, it's that feeling. A lot of answers to the question recently have been kind of like active verbs, and I just keep noticing it. And I think it's tied to energy. Like
Yes.
you'll be listeners. Elise will be doing some reading some of her poems, and that's going to be coming up in a bit. But the energy of the performance, of the spoken word. I do a lot of music on the show, and I found that I talked about this a couple times, but I found that when I've been stuck in the show, or somehow because I've been doing it for 4 years, so there's different periods. But when
Mm.
I've been stuck, what I've done is I've tapped into the energy of the live performance or something that's happening on the street to try to tap into some energy to kind of jolt me creatively. And that's what I like about the, spoken word and poetry and music. Elise, did you want to do you want to read a couple poems? I guess I might have prompted that in my head
Sure.
more than anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, what shall we do? Like 2 poems? You want me to
That would
start
be
with 2?
let's do 2 and then let's do 1 to lead us out.
Okay. All right. So this first one is called For All the Dreams I Still Have Yet to Dream and All the Dreams Once Had. I said I want to cast spells, mother. Let the pearls drip forth from the oyster shell in my mouth. I want to taste the cities, mother. Hold the earth like a lover holds my hips above the ledge of his. I won't hold secrets and empty promises. I want blood oath and lightning strikes, terror and the shriek of a nightmare, jolting me alive, nocturnal birds once the day sets. Watch the girls as they set their masks down, embrace our dark nights and vulnerability, that I still cry and shout so you could hear me over the sting in my throat, the sting of this salt, these crusting waves I swear to God one day I'm going to drown in. But for now, I'm learning how to float, how to sip of love and not get drunk. Oh, how the tide wants to pull me back with her, but I am still a stubborn woman, mother. I am learning how to take a fighter's stance. On shifting plates, I try to pirouette and I am graceless. But thank God for that. Thank God for my vulgar mouth and my 2 small hands. They hold this bleeding organ like an offering to no God at all but my younger self, that Holy Ghost, haunting skeletal halls that creak a little more upon waking now. Kneecaps remember what it was like to run, hunched, howling because it hurt to learn I must become a beast. Some of us never shed the pelt for wings. Forget we were made for skies and we make our own heavens from the pearly gates of our teeth. A smile that bites back like a dog in the junkyard, a warning behind a chain link fence. We were all born in the gutter with our eyes full of stars. Mother, maybe we did fall to earth from Mars. But I still believe in what we've been building here, even if we burn it down daily. Aren't we all witches set to burn at the stake daily? Joan of Arc, and maybe I am crazy. Crazy as my feet levitate from the grass, as I dance and spin, righteous, divine like a dervish. I spin in the grass and the dew wets my cheeks. I think I'm crying. For all the lost souls who once held mad dreams, foaming like the seashore at the mouth of their bays. There is no jetty jagged enough to break my wake. Oh, I am dreaming, mother. Do not attempt to wake me.
There's always this, I have this in my head. I'm going to say it out loud, Elise. What do you say after the poetry performance as a podcast host? There's this, I came up with wicked cool, being from out
I
east.
yeah.
That's fantastic. You have one more for us now, right?
Yes. I've been told this is a fan favorite. I do have a lot of people come up to me and tell me that this is the one that hits them. So shout out to my dear friend Becky, who always says she loves this poem. I do believe she said she wanted it tattooed on her. So
Whoa.
I know, right? What a compliment. This is called I Will Edit Manuscripts, but I Will Not Edit Myself. I do not wish for snapshots. I want the whole damn panorama. The extended cut, the unedited scroll you let roll forth from the typewriter like a carpet you did not have pulled out from under you. And I want the dust you swept under that carpet when your mother wasn't looking, when you grew tired of the nagging, after you unpacked all the boxes of your body you kept closed up, taped shut because you've been so afraid to unpack your baggage and buy furniture with sturdy legs. Legs that will dent the carpet. Legs that might scratch that hardwood if you don't first lay down some velvet to buffer it. I say refuse all buffers. Like bowling without bumpers. Like sometimes I don't care if my ball lies in the gutter, scream guttural. If today you cracked the mirror and didn't like the imperfect reflection. Scream if it makes you feel better, because hawks don't consider the eardrums of earthworms. They scream because they are flying high and they are hunting. They are taking all the opportunity has laid before them because God gave them claws. So do not retract yours. We have deemed declawing inhumane. So what if you scratch a little? If you sting a little? If the blood reminds the spineless you are still here?
Thank you, Alise. Thank you for the
Thank you.
poetry. Very, very, very wonderful. Live poetry performance and the energy, and as you would probably know, but I'm remembering again is when you read poetry and then you hear that poetry and just how those words sound, going back to how I was trained when I was much younger.
Yes.
Does that training stick or does it not? Wow.
It really does. Your teacher reminds me of my English teacher, Mr. Hickman, because I feel like those two teachers would have gotten along very well.
This guy, I got to tell you about this guy a little bit more. And it was Professor Menzel, and this is English lit. Like I said, concentration in poetry. You probably knew everything in the universe. This guy, he had a kind of New York accent, little bit of a drawl, and just a great pronouncement of like poetic phrases, and everything was dramatic. Even when he lectured, and I was a freshman, and he liked me, but he'd give me shit. Right? He'd just give me shit, like I was like some punk kid or something. And he one day he says in the back of class, this is like 2 weeks into college, he said, I asked some sort of question. He said, Mr. Vellante, you're a freshman, aren't you? That was it. I was like, okay.
Oh, jeez.
I got the point. All right, sorry about that. I'll smarten up next time. Yeah, that's the type of thing that can happen in your poetry classes. I was always set the right way by him, though. Great intellect and great poet. So now we had Mrs. Jessup to thank, and thank you, Becky, as well. We got a thank you list. Jessup and Becky
That's
going
a very
on.
lengthy thank you list, honestly, and that I feel like that's just goes to show how important community really is.
Well, when you think about what you create and you start to think of maybe influences and people, and if your mind organizes it in that way, that's why your list is like, I got to thank these 36 folks who contributed the ideas of this in a conversation in 2017. It's like, I understand, just thinking about that and organizing and acknowledging folks. I got a question connected to art itself, and it's along the lines of the role of art and what you see as the role of art, and whether that role is different now, as we record this in 2023 than it's been. So the role of art.
Well, the role of art, now I'm just thinking about how we're protesting down in, what is it, Florida now, the David statue.
Oh yeah.
So I'm kind of thinking we definitely need more art, because we need to expand people's small little horizons and views. God, I just going back to empathy, because I think the society is really lacking it at this point. How we're so self-centered in a sense that we cannot see how someone else might be living or breathing or walking through this world. But if you go through like art history, I kind of just get this sense of, you can see how like the forefront of what was in people's minds, like, I don't know, I'm thinking like Renaissance art, like we had so many images of God and, religious iconography.
Sure.
And you just go through history thinking, what did people paint about? What did people write about? You're learning something about history from the people who lived it, which I feel is kind of different than if you're getting history from, say, a textbook or a political standpoint, because you might not, or the media, in fact, because you wouldn't get like the whole story. But if you're getting it from the standpoint of the artists, you get more of a feeling of how people actually are living. So I think the role of art is to tell our stories and
Yeah.
bring people
I,
together.
yeah, I think with in thinking about art, and one of the pieces I think a lot is about, as an artist, you can inhabit a different space, and you can tempt and push your idea of freedom of expression in a way that can be limited, right? That we might want to
Right.
rebel against, but in a way, in an area where you can't do that in other places. You can't get the cover as a non-artist sometimes for some of the things you could do as an artist, or what you wish to invoke, or if the images you wish to show are disjointed and subversive. It's, there's so much energy or around what an artist might be able to do with that. Is I have general beliefs that I don't accept basic fundamental conceptions of the society I live in, and the reality and some of the categories that we use around race and how to. I have a complicated um, relationship with all that, and I think art has the potential to be an area of liberation and freedom and personal healing. That
Yes.
that's where the power is. Like, I feel sometimes like if you look at society as is and you try to operate within,
Ugh.
it's really tough. Or if you're limited by what you expect the horizons to be, do you find in writing poetry you have a type of freedom that you might not be able to find other places?
Yes, yes. And I think that goes back to me not always being able to verbalize how I feel or what I think. So writing the poem is it's just so much easier for me to eloquently put down what I think and what I feel and how to process things. I've got a new book coming out, which was very heavily just deals with all of the traumatic things that have been going on in society since like 2020, but obviously before that. But it's a way to process everything, and I think without censoring yourself, because I feel like in some spaces, like you do, you might have to censor a little bit what you say depending on where you are.
Yeah,
But I
you
think,
recognize the audience. There are a lot of times we
yeah,
recognize an audience we might be
definitely, like,
speaking to. Yeah.
there are definitely some people that, like just even conversations with my parents, it's like, all right, this conversation, they're just not gonna be able to hear this. They can't, comprehend it. Um, but I think in that regard, if I write a poem now, it's a little bit easier to ingest, maybe, like, especially if people have differing opinions on things. I think there's a way that art makes it a little bit more bite-sized in a sense. You could find some piece of it that everyone can relate to in some way. So you could bridge a gap, I feel, easier with art,
As a way
and
of
especially
communicating.
poetry.
It's a different way of
Yes.
communicating. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I definitely jive with that. I want to ask you another big question, so we get all the big questions out of the way, or looking at it a different way, we use the magic of all the big questions, in the conversation. But of course, the show's title is a big question about creation, or why things are. Is why is there something rather than nothing?
That's such a heavy question, but one that I've been thinking about all week, honestly, because
It's not an evil laugh that I did when I started.
no, I know. Because there's always got to be something. You have to, as a person, especially, I think, especially now, probably everyone for all time has had to find one thing that gets them up in the morning, that keeps them going, You know, there are some dark, heavy days that people experience, and that nothingness, I mean, you can't give in to that. That is, I think that's also why we have art and those connections with people brought to us by art, because you need to hold on to something. This life is very short, and that nothingness feels like very daunting and bleak, you know, and so heavy, but just one little something, you know? It can be as simple as like a line in a poem that you just keep going back to, and it gets you through like those really bad days.
Yeah, that's why there's something rather than nothing. I think of the songs you hold on to, right? That whole concept,
Yes,
the songs that saved your life, the song, um,
I
the poetry and the
definitely think,
lyricism,
yeah,
right?
poetry saved my life. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think when we look at these areas and how important they are, there's a fight in my head against kind of non-thought through ideas of what artists do and who they are in society, kind of like caricatures or stereotypes. And those can be funny a
Oh,
little
yeah.
bit, right? If you're in the
Yeah,
right
sometimes.
if you're in the right mood for them. But I think there's something unique and special about the artist and being able to pull from different areas where I think we come so specialized in a capitalist society around skills and the value of skills that when you look at what artists do and when you talk to them and it's like, oh, I paint and I do poetry and I can also write business uh, articles and I can
Yeah,
also sing. And I used to play the piano, but I haven't played in 3 years. I also do, like, you
right.
know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, like it feels like you're really, doing something. And that's the energy I've connected to in art and talking to other artists is like the getting up on and over the getting through. Um,
Yes.
well, and that's probably why I dig your poetry too. So, right.
Thanks. No,
um,
I feel like, because, like, you think about, I don't know, not to knock anybody else's career paths or anything, but I'm always thinking back to, like, the height of the pandemic and in quarantine, and the things that were getting people through was art, your music, the books, the whatever movies you were able to stream. Like, that is how we got through a very difficult, lonely time.
yeah, like keeping your company, like
Yeah,
you're in a different voice. I was talking to a couple guests recently and just hearing a little bit of the phenomena of listening to podcasts or maybe like individual artists working in isolation or having to crank stuff out in a particular way and listening to like podcasts or creative podcasts to be like, like there's people having a conversation about like this whole creating thing that I'm doing around me. And it was like, oh, that's a kind of a cool concept and idea to kind of create that type of environment. So
it's necessary.
yeah, absolutely. Elise, where does everybody go to find, like the things you create, where you are live online? Tell us the title of the new book, all that stuff.
Ah, yes. So you could find me at aliseversella.com. I'm very active on Instagram, so you could find me at Alise0x on Instagram. But my website has all of the social media links, where you can find the books. I will even let you slide into the DMs, and if you wanted a signed copy, that's how you can get it.
I got one of
Uh,
those. I got one of
yes.
those.
So I will take solicitations for books through direct message, but that is all I will take.
Solicitations for books. It's an open trade of which I've been engaged in for a long time. It's good. It's good.
But the new book is called A Psalm for the Weary. It is due out with Alien Buddha Press. We're getting that to you as quickly as possible.
You sound to be in that moment. It will arrive. It
It's
will.
happening. There are like so many that will be arriving at some point this year.
Oh gosh. Well, no, it's really great to talk to you, Alise. And I got to tell you, I don't know if there's a challenge or something on my part. I've had a lot of guests out from Jersey and New York. I mean, like 4 or 5 in the last month. I've only had one from
Oh, yes.
up in Massachusetts, Boston area. I'm from Rhode Island, and I'm just saying out loud. I'm not trying to create a competition here, but you know, the New Yorkers are pulling ahead. So, but it is great to talk to you and to talk poetry. I've had poets Joanna Valenti and Bunkang Tuan and Imran Zainab on the
Yes.
show, and it's and more, and it's a nice thing for me to connect to. And I just wanted to thank you for your time, Elise.
Thank you for your time. Poets love talking poetry with people, so
I've noticed.
any opportunity I have.
I noticed for everybody out there, poets love to talk about poetry if you give
We
them the
really do.
opportunity. So
Please
I
give us the
my,
opportunity.
and my brain, this is obviously poetry friendly territory, but my brain goes in too many different directions. So there's a finite amount of poetry slots. Thank you so much, and look forward to the new book. And thanks for talking about big things like healing and connecting through the arts and getting through. I know that message has resonance today and into the
Yeah.
future. So really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
This is Something Rather Than Nothing,